I Bury the Living is a 1958 released horror film written by Louis Garfinkel and directed by Albert Band. In the movie, actor Richard Boone plays the role of one Robert Kraft, the current head of a family-owned chain of department stores, who is given the somewhat annoying job of acting as the temporary head of a local cemetery, as per company and family tradition. Robert's job as a chairman of the committee and acting manager of the cemetery is to oversee the distribution of the graveyard's many burial plots, most of which have been reserved for his hometown's respected families. In order to keep track of which plots have been purchased and which plots have already been used, the cemetery makes use of a specially printed map of the area, with which Robert is expected to keep careful track of the available burial space by use of black and white colored pins, the white pins being used for those who are still alive, and the black pins for those who are deceased and scheduled for burial. Due to an act of either negligence or lack of concern on Robert's part, however, a set of black pins are one day misplaced where white pins ought to be put instead, and this is followed up by the sudden deaths of those to whom the pinned burial places belong. This bizarre series of coincidences causes Robert to fall into an anxiety-induced fit, where he becomes desperate to confirm or debunk the theory that either he or the map is actually causing the people whose spaces he marks with black pins to suddenly die.
And I hear today they've been killed, and the map's had them on the blacklist all the time.
Okay, so what?
Nothing. It just made me feel a little eerie, that's all.
I think he means he marked the young couple for death, sir.
Yeah, I guess that was it. It must have been the feeling I had. Well, it's funny what'll go through a guy's mind, isn't it?
I Bury the Living is rather low-budget drive-in fare for its time period, and there's hardly more than maybe 2 or 3 locations shown throughout the story, with much of the action taking place in a small cemetery office as well as in and around the graveyard itself, for which the Angelus Rosedale Cemetery in Los Angeles acted as the live set. But the movie is effective in driving home the fear and uncertainty experienced by Boone's character as he attempts, seemingly in vain, to prove or disprove to himself that he is somehow directly responsible for the deaths of those around him. And Boone is complemented very well too by some of the decent and perhaps better performances from the film's other players, such as Howard Smith and Theodore Bickel.
Put in a full day already, and I'll see you tomorrow.
No. Bobby, please. Bobby, listen. When you locked and bolted this place, I said to myself, now there's a man who knows his business. That's what I said. He may not know everything what's behind it, but he knows when a thing's to be fooled with and when it's to be left alone.
For most of the plot of I Bury the Living, the filmmakers opt for an intentional ambiguity regarding whether or not anything supernatural is actually happening. All the while, the film compensates for its lack of scale with a creative, almost experimental editing style, coupled with very shadow-laden photography, provided as each of these are respectively by crew members Frank Sullivan and Frederick Gately. This gives the movie a tone at times that treads close to a psychological thriller molded in the tradition of American film noir. But the movie's scope and simplicity also makes it feel like it could very easily be an episode of some classic television anthology series. In addition, the bombastic and somewhat carnivalesque music from composer Gerald Fried adds to the escalating nature of Robert's obsession, and is visually complemented by the intentional and almost humorously inconsistent size of the cemetery map, which also seems to leer at Robert with an ever-increasing mockery through its cartoonishly abstract design. While I don't think I Bury the Living is the best film of its type, and it is certainly a B-movie of its era, with all the riffable setbacks and flaws which may or may not be tolerable to some modern viewers, it is easy to see how the movie gained a cult following over the decades as it slipped into the public domain. If nothing else, it is a good movie to show to friends and family who don't yet know all its twists and turns. And it's especially good for those who are already fans of movies or television possessing that 1950s American middle-class chic. But unlike other films of this mold, it relies more on tension and atmosphere, and not so much on schlock or any of the gaudier Hollywoodisms of the period.
Other chairmen and so on have been putting pins in that map for years, and nothing happened.
But with me,
It isn't impossible for a certain kind of man to be endowed with powers that nobody had ever dreamed he could have. A lot of scientists claim that.